the Australian government has confirmed its support this morning for the US strikes against Iran as the world waits for Iran's response.
For more on this, we are joined by Director of International and Security Affairs at the Australian Institute, Emma Shortis. Emma, thanks for your time this morning. First of all, Penny Wong addressed the US strikes this morning, saying Australia supports any action that prevents Iran gaining nuclear weapons. What is your reaction to that, and what is your response to the criticism that Australia's response was slow?
Well, I'll start with the question of whether it was slow. I think this government was elected on the basis of being careful and considered. So it's not surprising that they waited to see what Trump in particular was saying about these strikes on Iran. I think what is surprising is that the statement wasn't stronger, that this attack against Iran contravenes international law and that Australia stands for the principles of international law. That statement of support, I think, given what the Trump administration is doing, was quite surprising.
We are at a critical point now. The world is on edge, waiting to see what Iran does next. There is speculation it could force them to the negotiating table, or it could escalate things. It could force more retaliation. What do you see them doing?
Well, I think that's the danger of this situation, that the Trump administration is cornering a dangerous regime, and we're now in a position where we are relying on Iranian restraint. And, if that regime feels cornered and feels like it has no choice, then of course it's going to respond. That was always the danger. And I think that's why these attacks were always incredibly risky and unnecessary.
Well, Donald Trump this morning effectively called for a regime change in Iran, and make Iran great again, were his words. How significant is it for a US president to make a statement like that, and how likely is that to happen?
I think it's hugely significant and it's really dangerous. And I would say that there have been people in Washington, D.C. For decades who have been angling for regime change in Iran. So it's not surprising that Trump is calling for this, but it is incredibly dangerous because there's clearly no plan for what happens after the regime is toppled. There's no clear plan for victory. And we know what kind of situation this gets the United States into. We've seen it in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it appears that the lessons of that history just are not being learnt.
Or what would a vacuum of leadership mean in Iran?
That would be incredibly destabilising and dangerous, of course, for the Iranian people who, the vast majority of whom don't support the regime. And I think that instability would almost inevitably spill out into the Middle East. And that's why this situation is so dangerous and, again, entirely avoidable.
Well, Iran, meantime, is threatening to block a major shipping channel. This is part of its many suggested forms of retaliation to those strikes on its nuclear facilities. So what impact would that have globally, the blocking of that shipping channel?
Again, look, this is entirely predictable in terms of a potential response from Iran, given the importance of that shipping lane. And look, I would say that we should be circumspect about predicting consequences because the situation is changing so quickly and panic is not helpful. But certainly, the closing of that strait could have a significant economic impact. It could have a significant impact on oil prices. And of course, we can add that, uncertainty to Trump's tariffs as well. There's already a lot of instability in the global economy, and this is just going to add to that.
Bringing it back to Australia's reaction, the PM will convene a meeting of the National Security Committee in response to further escalations in the Israel-Iran war. What do you expect will be the top of the agenda for our government?
Look, I hope that at the top of the agenda will be a push to return to diplomacy, not just on the part of Iran, but on the part of the United States as well. Australia is already deeply enmeshed in the American military industrial complex, and so we faced significant risks. And so I hope at the top of the agenda is peace building and making sure that Australia isn't drawn into this conflict.
Such uncertain times that we live in, aren't they? Emma Shortis, great to get your insights this morning. Thanks for giving us your time.
Thanks, Emma.
Thanks for having me.